Hello, Chiara and Andrea. So great to catch up with you today on Gismondi on Wine, and we're really looking forward to having a discussion about Barolo, about Nebbiolo, and of course about Mirafiore and its wonderful long history. Why don't we start there? Because the property started in the late 19th century, but after a quick start, there was a long break. So what is the history of the property?
Thank you, Tony, for having us. We are very pleased to speak with you and to talk to the history of Mirafiore. Mirafiore was founded in 1878 by the son of the first king of unified Italy, Count Emanuele Alberto di Mirafiore, a brilliant entrepreneur that made Mirafiore one of the greatest winery in Piedmont. He died very young, at the age of only 42 years old, and was succeeded by his son that didn't have the same passion as his father for the cultivation of vines and the production of wine. So unfortunately, in 1931, the estate was declared failed, and the history of Mirafiore stopped for over 70 years, when in 2008, the actual owner, Oscar Farinetti, decided to rebuild the estate, rebuild the winery and the brand, and give Mirafiore a new life, bringing it back to its original splendor.
Well, since the startup of the winery, the start back, there's been a lot of changes in Barolo. Lots of talk about modern wines, classic wines. Let's start with Mirafiore. How would you describe it today? Is it a modern producer with a look at the old ways, or how would you describe the style at Mirafiore?
First of all, Mirafiore is a very historical name of the Barolo, but it's a winery that has always looked ahead, looked to the future. And the testimony is that we have a very young winemaker, Andrea. Andrea is only, how old are you, Andrea?
29.
So Andrea is 29, he has a huge experience in Barolo, in the Chianti Classico area. So Andrea, how would you describe the Barolo of Mirafiore?
The Barolo Mirafiore è il massimo della concezione di Barolo della Langa, il massimo del Barolo classico del Barolo in Langa.
Barolo, according to Mirafiore, Barolo is the most classic experience of the Barolo in the Langa area.
È prodotto solo in botti grandi, quindi come concettualmente veniva prodotto il Barolo dei tempi, e con le migliori vigne della zona di Serralunga.
It's produced using only medium-sized volume of barrels, so very traditional technique with only the best grapes of the area, in Serralunga and Barolo.
And Barolo, what's interesting for, say, North Americans who are new to wine or trying to understand Barolo, it's a place, it's a wine. Like, how do you define Barolo to give people some sense of what it is?
Barolo is definitely a place, is definitely a village. Barolo is an area. Barolo is a way of thinking, okay?
Like
that's what Barolo is. Barolo is classic Italian wines, is one of the greatest wines of Italy, but it's also a wine that must be approachable, must be drunk, must be elegant. That's what we look for with Mirafiore.
Well, this would be a good opportunity, Andrea, to talk a bit about Nebbiolo, the only grape in Barolo. In fact, it's a grape that doesn't really do well anywhere else in the world. So let's talk Nebbiolo.
Nebbiolo è la madre del Barolo, quindi abbiamo la stessa uva. Il concetto di vino Nebbiolo però è per avere un vino più fruttato, più bevibile, molto più fresco e aperto un po' a tutti.
The grape variety for both Nebbiolo and Barolo is the same. the grape variety is the Nebbiolo. The concept behind the Langhe Nebbiolo is to make a more accessible wine with more fruity note, a sweeter tannin, so something that can be drunk easily from every consumer in the world. So Nebbiolo, let's say it's the getaway into the world of Barolo.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems to me that Nebbiolo is unique to that region. Can you tell us maybe why it does so well in Piedmont?
Nebbiolo does. In Piedmont, there are unique terroir conditions. What really makes the difference in Piedmont is the terroir, meaning the combination between the soil and the climate, which is unique and completely different to everywhere else. So in Piedmont, we have calcareous soil, very compact, especially in Serralunga, very dry, with a climate that can be defined as continental. So, and we have what we call the nebbia, the fog, from which the word nebbiolo comes from. Nebbiolo comes from the Italian word nebbia, that means fog. That's because Nebbiolo is the latest grape variety to be harvested in late October, sometimes beginning of November, very rarely lately because of the weather conditions have changed a lot, but that's what really makes the difference.
So Andrea, when we talk about the wines, there's a hierarchy. So you introduced the Langhe wine as something maybe to drink younger, more approachable. But let's talk about just briefly Barolo, Barolo Reserva, the crus. What is the difference? How do you separate those wines? How can consumers understand why they're paying more or less for this series of wines?
Allora, il Barolo classico è concettualmente un vino di rappresentanza della zona e dell'annata.
So Barolo Classico is conceptually the wine that better represents the area and the vintage, okay? And is an expression of the winery, the most classical and typical expression of the winery. So when a consumer drink a glass of Barolo from Mirafiore, they immediately think about the style of Mirafiore and the area where Mirafiore is.
Il Barolo Riserva è la miglior rappresentanza dell'annata, con le parti migliori, con i vigneti migliori di quell'anno.
The Barolo Riserva is the best expression of a single vintage, made with carefully selected grapes from that specific vintage. Is the highest expression of a Barolo from a specific vintage. Like a sort of picture, a sort of time machine that brings you back exactly in that vintage.
In the old days, it would have more time in barrel. Is that changed now? Is the Barolo and the Reserva pretty similar in the time it spends in wood?
Sì, il periodo di invecchiamento del Barolo rispetto al Barolo Riserva, il Barolo Riserva è maggiore di un anno, il Barolo in botte grande.
So the aging period of the Barolo Riserva is longer, at least 1 year in a big size barrels. That's what really makes the difference.
Now you make a couple of crus, so I'd love to get a explanation about a cru Barolo, because is it a single vineyard, a single block? How would you talk about your cru wines at Mirafiori?
Allora, i cru Mirafiore sono Lazzarito, sono Paiagallo, sono i singoli vigneti, quindi la maggior rappresentanza di quel singolo territorio, di quella singola annata. Quindi,
so yes, when you drink a cru, you take a picture of a specific area, because the cru are made using grapes from a very specific area, and in the Barolo area, each single cru is completely different one from the other.
Ogni cru ha un suo microclima, ha un suo terreno diverso, e quindi la pianta reagisce in modo diverso in base al terreno sottostante, in base al clima.
Every single cru has a different soil, has a different weather condition, has a different climate. So the vines react differently to different soils, different climate, and definitely in the end, they give different expressions.
Well, I guess we should get to the tasting. We'll start with the Langhe. Maybe just before, Chiara, beautiful bottle, fantastic embossed
you.
top on it. Can you tell us about the history of that, or?
Yeah, the emboss is the symbol of the Mirafiore family. M stands for Mirafiore. You see the crown on top recalls people that this family is strictly linked to the royal family, because actually the Count Emanuele Alberto di Mirafiore was the son of the king.
Okay, Andrea, let's talk about the 2016 Langate Nebbiolo. Such a great vintage. Everybody's talking about it. What can you tell us?
L'annata 2016 in generale è stata un'annata molto, molto precisa, molto quasi perfetta. È stata un'annata in cui l'acqua e la pioggia non sono mancati, in cui il caldo è stato abbondante e in cui la maturazione dell'uva è stata perfetta e siamo riusciti ad ottenere i tannini all'interno del nebbiolo maturi al punto giusto.
2016 has been almost the perfect vintage. Right rain, perfect rain at the right moment. Warm weather in the perfect period. We have been able to take the grapes to perfect maturation, getting very elegant, soft, perfectly mature tannins inside the grapes, already in the grapes. That's what helped us make almost perfect wines, because it was the vintage, almost perfect vintage.
So a wine we can drink earlier, Chiara. So what kind of things would the Italians serve with this? What kind of food would you serve with a Langhe?
Yes. Okay, so the Langhe Nebbiolo Mirafiore stands out for its elegance. That's the note that immediately reaches you, both on the nose with its flowery bouquet and in the mouth with its soft and silky tannins. I would suggest to pair it with pasta. In Piedmont, we have a very traditional pasta called tagliarin, which are egg noodles, cooked with some ragu sauce, just to add some meaty note in the dish that perfectly combines with the fatness of the tagliarin.
All right, Andrea, let's talk Barolo. Barolo is a long-lived wine, so it's great to have a wine in the market that's already 8 years old. We're looking at the 2014. Tell us about this wine and where it's at today.
Nel 2014 è stata un'annata un po' più complicata, ma non per il nebbiolo. Per il nebbiolo all'inizio dell'estate ha piovuto molto, ma intorno a fine settembre le piogge sono finite e hanno lasciato spazio al nebbiolo di maturare in modo perfetto.
2014 has been a bit more difficult as a vintage compared to 2016, but luckily not for the Nebbiolo. We had a lot of rain during the whole summer, but luckily the rain stopped right before the period of maturation of the Nebbiolo that was able to reach the final maturation, even if they had a very difficult summer.
And what do you think about the 8-year mark for Mirafiore? Is it just the beginning of the start, or how well does the wine age?
Secondo me è un Barolo che comunque riesce a invecchiare, magari invecchia meno di altre annate, ma comunque riesce comunque a invecchiare 20-30 anni, perché abbiamo comunque una notevole struttura del vino, anche una bella acidità e una freschezza all'interno che riescono a dare anni a questo vino.
Thanks to the backbone, the structure of the wine, combined with the acidity and the overall freshness, this wine is going to be able to age for at least 20-30 years. Maybe 2014 is not going to age as well as a 2016, probably, yes, but it still has a long life ahead.
Well, for our viewers, the 2016, we're getting a little allocation of it in the marketplace, so I'm sure it's going to disappear quickly. That would be a wine I would buy and maybe drink once a year for the next 25 or 35 years. It would be a lot of fun to follow that wine along the journey. But we can look forward to 2018.
2018 has been our first organic vintage. So 2018 is going to be our first organic Barolo. Mirafiore has been one of the first and definitely one of the most important wineries to turn to organic agriculture in 2018. Andrea, would you give us a bit of information about the vintage itself?
2018 è stata un'annata molto simile al 2016. A inizio settembre ha fatto molto fresco, la mattina soprattutto. Questo ha permesso alle uve di Nebbiolo di mantenere una bella freschezza, una bella acidità, ma facendo maturare in modo molto importante il tannino e dando così longevità al vino stesso, ma mantenendo i profumi molto freschi.
Okay, so 2018 has been a vintage pretty similar to 2016, but in September we had very good mornings. This allowed us the Nebbiolo to maturate perfectly, while at the same time maintaining a good freshness, both in the nose, in the aromas, in the bouquet, as well as in the mouth.
Well, Chiara, you mentioned organics and sustainability. How are you managing now to feed that through the Mirafiore wines, and what has been the reaction?
Mirafiore has always worked according to sustainable practices since the very beginning, so since 2008. But we have understood little by little the importance to preserve the soil. I want to be very frank, making organic agriculture in Piedmont is difficult. It's not easy, it's expensive, but we firmly believe that it's necessary to preserve the beauty of the area where we are.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the beauty of the area, because you have a fantastic site, and I'm anxious. Well, I would like you to tell our viewers a little bit about visiting the property and looking at some of these incredible assets that you have for people who are visiting in the region.
Yes. So the Langhe area has been awarded into the UNESCO World Heritage List since 2014. At Mirafiore, we are open 24/7. So people can just come into the property and walk in our beautiful park. We offer wine tours, wine tastings. We have 2 restaurants in the property. One is Michelin star restaurant. We have 2 hotels, and we're gonna open a very new one in August. It's gonna be our first luxury spa on the top of the hill, super beautiful. We have plenty of activities to do. So if you want to come and spend a few days with us, we're going to happy to welcome you.
Well, the property looks fantastic. I think anybody who goes to Barolo will fall in love with the place the moment they get there. So thanks so much for joining us, Andrea and Chiara. I've really enjoyed speaking with you today, and I think we learned a lot about Nebbiolo and Barolo. And I really look forward to seeing you in Canada or Italy as soon as possible.
Absolutely. You're going to be welcome. We are waiting for you.